People approach you when you drive a Ferrari. People at petrol stations, supermarket stores, and even on the motorway will motion you to open the window and converse. They typically ask, "What is it?" when it comes to the F8 Tributo. In today's video, we are discussing the Ferrari F8 Spider versus the Ferrari 458 Spider, two powerful turbos. Kindly stay tuned until the end of the video so that you can tell them both apart. Since the launch of the 458 Italia in 2011, Ferrari's salespeople have said Italia 458 Special, 488 GTB, 488 Pista, and now the F8 Tributo. Yes, I'm skipping all the convertibles. That's a lot of mid-engine V8 Ferrari designs to keep track of, especially because they're all sort of the same car beneath and look pretty darn similar if you're not paid to look. Let's take a closer look. From the side, and yes, the blue one below is the finest profile photograph Ferrari bothered to provide of the 66 press photos of the F8 Tributo, you can tell the difference between the F8 and the 488 is primarily, not entirely, aero modifications. The F8 has a more sculpted appearance than the rather bloated 488. The splitter below the nose on the F8 is more prominent than on the 488. The division in the massive air intake is higher up. The F8's aggressive sill, notably directly in front of the rear wheel, is a dead giveaway from the side. I'm sure it cuts up the air better, but I prefer the 488's sleek appearance. The spoiler on the F8 is bigger and more aesthetically pleasing. Moving on, you can see how much cleaner, purer, and simpler the Italia was, especially between the wheels when compared to the F8. The Tributo has been chiseled. The switch to dual turbos with the 488 prompted the requirement for massive air intakes, one for each intercooler, and it's not as attractive as the 458. Having said that, the nose and the tail end of the two, the areas outside the wheelbase, have a striking resemblance. From the beginning, I believe the F8 design is the clear winner. It's angry and vicious, almost as if it's striking its tongue at you in the moire fashion. I also like the air intakes above the headlights. Furthermore, as we'll see in a moment, the Tributo appears to be a more aggressive version of the Italia, while the 488 appears to be a completely separate vehicle. In addition, the GTB design is quite soft in its contrast. The F8's fender peaks are powerful and slender. The 488 appears to be what it is here, an uncomfortable step between the 458 and the F8, onto which someone attempted to splice an F1 car's snout. This is unquestionably the 488 GTB's weakest point. The front of the F8 versus the 458 is a great comparison. I get the impression that the F8 was designed to look like the 488, but there was some pressure from the marketing side of the business to make a very weak F1 connection. The wicked appearance of the 458 is carried over to the even more evil-looking F8. Cartoonish in the finest conceivable way. Out in the back, I choose the Tributo over the GTB. That being said, I enjoy how sleek and modern the 488 looks, while the F8's butt is obviously scavenging from the 80s. The good news is that Ferraris looked great throughout the Reagan administration. Again, the 488's two taillights are beautiful, but nostalgia dictates that the 4 are superior. Take a peek at an F40, and no, you can't see through the cut-up Lexan engine cover on the F8. In terms of the F8's buttocks against the 458, the Tributo appears to be a progression of the Italia, admittedly one pumped full of steroids. I believe Ferrari squandered an opportunity by grafting 458's triple pipes onto the F8's quad-lightened rear end, so going full F40 tribute. Having said that, the F8's backside is the more appealing of the two. That's all there is to it. When switching from natural aspiration to forced induction, 488 and F8's hard side became completely cut up and scarred. Elegance was completely lost. However, from both the front and rear, the F8 Tributo is a vast improvement over the 488's fussy style, and it's a fun, attractive reincarnation of the 458 Italia, and now you understand what it is. Please weep a tear, Ferrari enthusiasts, for those two cars mark the end of the bloodline for Ferrari's famed mid-engine V8 series of cars. Many people people associate this series with Ferrari because Magnum PI drove a red one in the 1980s TV series. From the sleek 308 of the 1970s and the 328 of the 1980s through the more wedge-shaped 348 and 355 of the 1990s, not always everyone's cup of tea, but very much of their era, to the more rounded 360 and 430 of the 2000s and the recent evolution through 458, 488, and F8. The ancestral line of two-seaters grew in power and capability, if not always in beauty. The engine has always been a V8, and for many years, it has been an artwork seen behind the driver through a clear cover. Because the V8 will be replaced by a hybrid engine for environmental reasons, the F8's engine symbolizes the zenith of Ferrari's petrol engineering. We tested it in the F8's fixed roof, Tributo, and convertible Spider models. It's a magnificent piece of technology, delivering a burst of power that builds up to customary Ferrari climax and propels you into takeoff velocity in a plane. Every Ferrari handles wonderfully, but we couldn't help but think Ferrari had added some more fun to the F8 from the 488 that came before it. There was a perception that Ferraris were becoming too great for their own good, offering powers that were beyond comprehension to a driver, but were less exciting than in the past. The F8 re-engages the driver with a sharper steering and more involved suspension that makes you feel like you're driving the car rather than controlling a video game. Importantly, it does so at moderate speeds, so you don't feel like you have to take it to the racetrack to keep it entertained, a criticism we have with a number of supercars. When the V8 Ferrari lineage first appeared in the 1970s, the cars were not recommended for usage at low speeds because they overheated and were difficult to maneuver. More recently, they were simple to drive and dependable, if a little sterile. The F8 addresses this, and in what way? It is entirely up to you whether you like the Tributo or the Spider. The closed roof car is probably a little sharper around the racetrack, but you can't tell the difference when the roof is closed. We prefer open roof vehicles, so we'll gladly go with the Spider. It is a must-have V8 Ferrari, the last of its kind. Some argue that the 458, the final car to have a non-turbocharged engine, had less power but more glory in feelings and loudness than the F8. 458 Spider was the world's first mid-engine convertible with a folding aluminum roof. The roof is made of aluminum and weighs 25 kilograms less than the cloth roof fitted to the 430 Spider. It opens and closes in 14 seconds. It also packs very well, doesn't jeopardize the 458's aerodynamics with the roof up, and leaves enough space behind the seats for a small baggage shelf. The Ferrari roof is a wonderful packaging effort that is also straightforward to use. As a result of the rear deck reorganization, there is no longer a glass cover over the engine. Instead, a painted cover with 6 air extractors is provided. The air intakes, which were formerly situated near the B-pillar on the coupe, have been relocated immediately ahead of the rear lights. Mechanically, the Spider receives more supple damper rates, a milder throttle map, and a little fruitier exhaust tune than the Italia. Ferrari has kept the springs and anti-roll bar untouched in order to maintain the coupe's excellent steering response, lateral grip, and cornering abilities. The weight penalty it bears in comparison to the coupe is an incredibly commendable 50 kilograms, implying that there is a very little discernible performance difference between the two cars. Ferrari claims a 0 to 62 mph sprint time of 3.4 seconds, and the highest speeds of the two cars are only 4 miles apart, the Spider being slightly slower. Which one of these two cars do you prefer? Let us know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and leave a comment saying I subscribed, and I'll personally reply to your comment. Thanks!